I saw the hazard lights blinking through the snow before I saw the car itself, a silver sedan tilted at an angle on the shoulder of Interstate 40, Christmas Day, somewhere outside Knoxville, Tennessee. I almost kept driving. I was exhausted, my trunk was full of gifts I'd bought for a family that barely remembered my name, and I still had 3 hours to go. But something made me pull over. Something I can't explain. Maybe it was the universe giving me one last chance to see the truth. Because 10 days later, those two strangers would call my parents on live television and say 6 words that destroyed everything. We need to tell you something. My name is Veronica, and this is the story of how a simple act of kindness on a frozen highway led me to discover that the people I'd spent 32 years trying to please had been lying to me since the day I was born. It was 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Day, 2023. The sky was that flat, white-gray color that happens right before a serious snowstorm. I'd left my apartment in Charlotte at noon, heading west toward my parents' house in Nashville. Every year, same drive. Every year, same dread in my stomach. The elderly couple was standing beside their car, both of them bundled in coats that looked too thin for the weather. The man was maybe 70, silver hair, kind face. The woman had her arms wrapped around herself, shivering. Their rear tire was completely flat. I pulled up behind them, turned on my own hazards, and got out. "You folks okay?" I called. The man's face flooded with relief. "Oh, thank God. We've been here almost an hour. My phone's dead, and hers won't get a signal." His name was Robert. Hers was Patricia. They were on their way to see their daughter in Chattanooga, hadn't seen her in 2 years because of health issues and lockdowns and all the things that kept families apart. They had a spare tire, but Robert's hands were too stiff from arthritis to work the lug wrench. I changed the tire in 15 minutes. My hands were numb by the end, but I got it done. Patricia insisted on taking my number. "Please," she said, gripping my arm with both hands. "Let us thank you properly. Send us your address, we'll mail you something." I laughed it off. "No need. Merry Christmas." But she wouldn't let go. "Sweetheart, you stopped on Christmas Day. Most people wouldn't have. Please." So I gave her my number, thinking I'd never hear from them again. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever helped a stranger and wondered if it mattered, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. I got to my parents' house 3 hours later. The driveway was full of cars, my older brother Marcus's Tesla, my younger sister Hannah's SUV, even my uncle's pickup. The house glowed with lights and warmth and the kind of laughter that made me feel cold before I even stepped inside. My mother answered the door. "Oh, Veronica. You're late." Not "Merry Christmas." Not "We were worried." Just, "You're late." "Traffic," I said, which wasn't true. "Sorry." She stepped aside to let me in. "Well, we already ate. There's some ham left in the kitchen." Inside, the living room was chaos. Marcus's 2 kids were tearing through wrapping paper. Hannah was on the couch with a glass of wine, laughing at something my father had said. Everyone looked up when I walked in. "Hey, Ronnie," Marcus said, using the nickname I'd asked him not to use since I was 16. "Thought you weren't coming." "I texted I'd be here by 7, I said." My father didn't look up from his phone. "7's pretty late for Christmas." I stood there holding a bag of gifts I'd spent 2 weeks picking out, personalized stuff, thoughtful stuff, and felt the familiar tightness in my chest. The one that said, "You're not really part of this." I'd felt it my whole life. Here's the thing about being the forgotten child, it's not dramatic. It's not abuse. It's just absence. 1,000 tiny moments where you're overlooked, undervalued, left out of the frame. When I graduated college, my parents didn't come to the ceremony. Marcus's son had a baseball game the same day. When I got my first promotion at work, assistant manager at a logistics company, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," and changed the subject to Hannah's new car. I wasn't unloved. I was just less loved. Less important. The one they didn't think about first, or second, or sometimes at all. And I'd spent 32 years trying to fix it. Trying to be helpful, thoughtful, successful, enough. I sent flowers on birthdays. I showed up early to family events to help set up. I asked about their lives, remembered details, bought gifts that showed I was paying attention. None of it worked. That Christmas night, I stayed for 2 hours. I ate cold ham in the kitchen by myself. I watched Marcus's kids open the gifts I'd brought while my mother made comments about how expensive everything was getting. When I finally said I was heading home, no one tried to stop me. I cried the whole drive back to Charlotte. 10 days later, I was at my desk at work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Veronica? This is Patricia, from the highway. On Christmas. I sat up straighter. Oh. Hi. How are you? We're wonderful, honey. Listen, I know this is going to sound strange, but are you busy this Saturday? Robert and I would love to take you to lunch. We're in Charlotte visiting our son this weekend, and we'd really like to thank you properly. I hesitated. I didn't know these people. But something in her voice, warm, genuine, made me say yes. We met at a little Italian place downtown. Patricia and Robert brought me a beautiful scarf and a handwritten card that made me tear up in the middle of the restaurant. We talked for 2 hours. They asked about my life, my job, my family. And I found myself telling them things I didn't usually say out loud, how hard it was to feel invisible, how much I wished my parents would just see me. Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. "Sweetheart," she said quietly. "Have you ever asked them why?" I blinked. "Why what?" "Why they treat you differently." I'd never even considered it. I'd just assumed it was me. Something I was doing wrong. "Maybe you should," Robert said. His voice was gentle but firm. Sometimes people don't realize what they're doing until someone holds up a mirror. I drove to Nashville the following weekend. I didn't call ahead. I just went. My mother answered the door in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, clearly not expecting company. "Veronica? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you and Dad." She frowned. "About what?" "About why you treat me like I don't matter." The words came out harder than I meant them to. My mother's face went tight. She stepped back and let me in. My father was in the living room, watching a game. I stood in front of the TV until he looked at me. "We need to talk," I said. "Can it wait until halftime?" "No." If you've ever had to demand space in your own family, comment below. Hit like if you're still with me. This is where everything fell apart. My mother sat on the arm of the couch. I stayed standing. "I need you to explain something," I said, my voice shaking. "Why do you act like I'm not really your daughter?" My father's face darkened. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You didn't come to my college graduation. You didn't visit me in the hospital when I had my appendix out. You forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. You talk about Marcus and Hannah constantly, and you can barely remember to ask how I'm doing. You're being dramatic, my mother said. I'm being honest. Silence. Heavy, awful silence. Then my father said, very quietly, you wouldn't understand. Try me. He looked at my mother. Something passed between them, some silent conversation I wasn't part of. Then he sighed and rubbed his face. You were complicated, he said finally. When you were born. Your mother had a hard time. Postpartum stuff. We struggled. And I guess, we never really figured out how to, he trailed off. How to what? I pressed. How to love me. Don't twist this, my mother snapped. We've always loved you. It's been different with you. And maybe we didn't handle it perfectly. But you don't get to come in here and accuse us of being bad parents. I stared at her. At both of them. I'm not accusing you, I said softly. I'm telling you that I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong in this family. And I needed you to know. My father turned back to the TV. Well, now we know. That was it. That was the whole conversation. I left 10 minutes later, and neither of them walked me to the door. I called Patricia that night, crying so hard I could barely speak. She listened to everything, every word, every hurt. And then she said something that stopped me cold. Veronica, honey, did they ever tell you anything unusual about your birth? Anything that didn't quite add up? I frowned. What do you mean? Just think about it. Were there any gaps in the story? Anything that felt off? I thought back. My baby pictures were sparse. I didn't have a birth announcement like Marcus and Hannah did. My mother always got vague when I asked about the day I was born, said she didn't remember much, that it was a blur. Why are you asking? I said. Patricia hesitated. Because Robert and we've been thinking. And there's something we need to check. Can you trust me for a little while longer? Trust you with what? Just trust me. I'll call you in a few days. She hung up. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, feeling like the ground had just shifted under me. Patricia called me 4 days later. Her voice was tight, controlled, like she was trying very hard not to cry. Veronica, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you know if you were adopted? The air left my lungs. No, I whispered. I mean, I don't think so. They never said? Honey, Robert and I lost a daughter 32 years ago. She was stolen from the hospital 3 days after she was born. We never found her. And when I met you, when I saw your face, I thought I was imagining things. But then I started looking. And Veronica, her voice cracked. I think you might be her. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I need you to do a DNA test, Patricia said. I've already done mine. If you send yours in, we'll know for sure within 2 weeks. If this just gave you chills, drop a comment. Tap subscribe if you need to know what happens next, because this is where everything I thought I knew just shattered. I ordered the kit that night. Spit in the tube with shaking hands. Mailed it the next morning. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Marcus or Hannah. I went to work, came home, stared at the walls, and waited. And I thought about everything. Every dismissal. Every time my mother looked at me like I was a stranger. Every moment I'd felt like I didn't fit. What if I didn't? What if they'd known the whole time? The email came on a Tuesday. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. I saw the subject line, "Your DNA results are ready," and excused myself to the bathroom. I opened it with shaking hands. 99.7% match, parent-child relationship with Patricia Eleanor Harding. I dropped the phone. Patricia and Robert drove to Charlotte that night. We sat in my apartment, and they showed me everything they'd found. The police report from 1991. The hospital records that showed a baby girl, born to Patricia and Robert Harding on March 14, taken from the nursery in the middle of the night. The investigation that went nowhere. The case that went cold. And the article from 6 months later, about a couple in Nashville who'd registered a daughter's birth through a private adoption agency that was later shut down for falsifying records. My parents. "We think someone at the hospital was part of a black market adoption ring," Robert said quietly. "And we think your parents either knew, or they chose not to ask questions." Patricia was crying. "We looked for you for years, Veronica. We never stopped." I looked at her face, really looked. And I saw my own eyes staring back at me. My nose. The shape of my jaw. I'd been stolen. And the people who raised me had known. I wanted to storm over to Nashville and scream until they admitted it. But Patricia stopped me. "If they knew, they covered it up for 32 years, she said. "They'll have a story ready. We need to do this carefully." Robert agreed. "We need the media. We need public pressure. We need them to have nowhere to hide." So we called a lawyer. And then we called a local news station, one of those investigative journalism shows that loves a good human interest story. Family reunited after 32 years, the baby who was stolen and the parents who never gave up. The producer practically salivated. They wanted to do it live. A surprise reunion, with my adoptive parents in the audience. If you think that's savage, comment below. If you'd do the same thing, hit like. Because I promise you, I had no regrets. The taping was set for a Saturday afternoon in a studio in Nashville. The producers told my parents they were doing a feel-good segment about families reconnecting after the holidays. They asked them to come as audience participants for a story about a woman who'd helped strangers on Christmas. They had no idea it was about me. I sat backstage with Patricia and Robert, watching the monitor. The host, a woman named Kelly with perfect hair and a sympathetic smile, introduced the story. 32 years ago, a couple in Knoxville lost their newborn daughter. Stolen from the hospital. They never stopped looking. And this Christmas, a kind stranger helped them on the side of the road, and set in motion a reunion no one could have predicted. The camera cut to Patricia and Robert walking onto the stage. I watched my parents in the audience. I saw my mother's face go pale. "And now," Kelly said, smiling warmly, "we'd like to bring out the woman who made this possible. The daughter they lost. The daughter they found. Please welcome, Veronica." I walked onto that stage, and the entire studio went silent. My mother stood up like she'd been electrocuted. My father's face went gray. Kelly gestured to Patricia and Robert. Veronica recently discovered through DNA testing that these are her biological parents, and that she was taken from them as an infant. And now, we'd like to ask Veronica's adoptive parents to join us on stage. They had no choice. Cameras everywhere. Audience staring. They walked up like they were heading toward their own execution. Kelly smiled, but her eyes were sharp. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, did you know that Veronica was stolen? My mother's mouth opened. Closed. We adopted her legally. Through an agency that was later shut down for trafficking stolen children. My father's voice was tight. We didn't know that at the time. But you knew something was wrong, Patricia said, her voice trembling but strong. You never filed proper paperwork. You never listed a birth hospital on her records. You treated her like she didn't belong, because she didn't. If this moment is hitting you hard, leave a comment. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, because we're not done yet. The segment aired 2 days later. It went viral. By that night, my story was on every major news outlet. My parents' names were everywhere. The police reopened the investigation into the adoption agency. There were lawsuits, interviews, public outcry. My parents hired a lawyer and released a statement claiming they'd been victims too, that they'd had no idea the adoption wasn't legitimate. But the evidence didn't support that. The records Patricia's lawyer found showed they'd paid cash. No official agency name on the paperwork. No follow-ups, no home visits, nothing that a legal adoption would have required. They'd known. Maybe not everything. But enough. I moved back to Knoxville 3 months later. Patricia and Robert helped me find an apartment 10 minutes from their house. I met my biological brother, a man named Daniel who cried when he hugged me and said he'd always felt like someone was missing. I got to know them slowly. Carefully. They didn't push. They just loved me. The way I'd always wanted to be loved. My adoptive parents tried to reach out. Letters, calls, messages through Marcus and Hannah. I didn't respond. Not because I hated them. But because I finally understood, I didn't owe them anything. Not my forgiveness. Not my presence. Not my pain. They'd stolen my life, not just from me, but from the people who'd actually wanted me. And no apology could fix that. Here's what I'll tell you, sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. And sometimes the people who raised you aren't the people who should have. I spent 32 years trying to earn love that was never really mine to earn. I twisted myself into shapes that didn't fit, chasing approval from people who couldn't give it, because I was never theirs to begin with. And I don't blame that little girl who kept trying. Who kept hoping. Who thought if she just worked hard enough, loved loud enough, sacrificed deep enough, they'd finally see her. But I'm not her anymore. I'm Veronica Harding. Daughter of Patricia and Robert. Sister to Daniel. Found. Chosen. Loved. And if you're out there feeling invisible in your own family, if you're bending yourself into pieces trying to fit where you were never meant to be, I need you to hear this. It's not you. It was never you. And you deserve people who see you. Who choose you. Who love you without you having to beg for it. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me your story. I read every single one. And if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, I need you to know, you're not alone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. This is my story. And I'm finally free.